I never imagined betrayal could shatter me in so many ways at once. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old, and for 10 years, I lived under the illusion that I was loved. I was a high school literature teacher, someone who poured her soul into helping her students find meaning in words. I always believed in honesty, in loyalty, in building a life brick by brick with the person you called your partner. But life has a way of laughing in your face, tearing apart everything you thought was solid. And that's exactly what my husband did to me. The morning it all began was so deceptively normal that I still think about it sometimes, wondering how he could smile at me like that, kiss me goodbye, and still hold such poisonous secrets in his heart. I was sipping coffee, the morning sun spilling across the kitchen table, when I noticed how carefully he was packing his suitcase. He said he had a teachers' conference in Chicago, a 5-day event full of workshops and panels. I even teased him about taking fancy shirts for what was supposed to be a bunch of dull lectures. He laughed it off, kissed my cheek, and promised to call me every night. His cologne lingered long after the door closed, and for a moment I felt the strange ache of missing him before he was even gone. But then the first crack appeared. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, thinking it was just spam. But curiosity won, and when I opened it, the words chilled me to the bone. Your husband isn't who you think he is. Check the Palmer Hotel guest list. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. My first instinct was denial. Of course, this was some sick prank. My husband wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a liar. He couldn't be. Still, doubt has a way of creeping in like a shadow you can't shake. I told myself I'd just check just to silence the whisper in my head. I searched for the conference he supposedly attended. His name wasn't listed anywhere, not once. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the truth I didn't want to see. I tried again, retyping his name, double-checking the spelling. Still nothing. That was when my world started to tilt. I remembered little things I had brushed aside: his late nights at school, his sudden obsession with new clothes, the way he shielded his phone from me whenever a message came in. I had convinced myself it was stress, that he was just working too hard. But the evidence was staring me in the face now, and it was undeniable. I told myself I needed proof, something tangible. My feet carried me into his office before I could even stop them. I searched through his papers, praying to find nothing, praying to prove myself wrong. But tucked inside an art textbook, I found the note. His handwriting was familiar, but the words were not for me. Can't wait for our special getaway. You're my muse, my passion. I sank to the floor, clutching that note like it was a knife lodged in my chest. 10 years of marriage, of sacrifices, of believing in him, and he threw it all away for someone else. Her name was Megan, the young art teacher who had joined our school last year. I'd noticed her laugh, the way she lingered near him during staff meetings, but I had forced myself to believe it was harmless. Now it all made sense. The initials in his calendar, the mysterious special project. It wasn't a project, it was her. I couldn't breathe. My body shook with rage and grief so strong it felt like poison in my veins. And yet, in the middle of my breakdown, a new feeling emerged: resolve. If he thought he could humiliate me, destroy our vows, and walk away unscathed, he was wrong. I wasn't going to be the broken, silent wife who cried herself to sleep. I was going to uncover every lie, expose every secret, and make him face what he had done. And so, with trembling hands and a heart turned to fire, I began to plan my revenge. The first night after I found that note, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the empty space beside me, the sheets still carrying his scent, and felt the weight of 10 years pressing down on my chest. Every memory turned bitter. The vacations we'd taken, the late-night talks, even the vows we'd exchanged, they all felt poisoned now, as if they had been spoken by a man wearing a mask. I wanted to scream, to smash every picture frame in the house, but Emma, our daughter, was asleep down the hall. I couldn't let her see me fall apart, not yet. The next morning, I painted on a smile and packed her breakfast, my hands trembling as I sliced fruit and buttered toast. She looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes, the same eyes that once convinced me to forgive her father for every small mistake. But now no smile of his could erase the truth I carried inside me. After I dropped Emma at school, I drove aimlessly for a while, ending up in front of the Palmer Hotel. My heart hammered as I parked across the street. I told myself I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I only wanted the truth. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I waited in the car, hours dragging by, until finally around lunchtime I saw him. He walked out of the revolving doors with Megan by his side. Their hands brushed, and though they didn't hold each other openly, the intimacy was undeniable. The way he looked at her, it was a look I hadn't seen directed at me in years. My stomach turned to stone. There it was, proof. No more denial, no more excuses. He wasn't at a conference, he wasn't working late. He was with her in our city, lying to my face with every breath he took. When I got home, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. Receipts tucked into his jacket, little notes left on his desk, the hotel booking email he thought he had deleted. Each one was a nail in the coffin of our marriage, and I saved them all carefully. I wasn't just going to leave him, I was going to make sure the world knew who he really was. But the rage inside me demanded more than just a divorce. He had humiliated me, risked our family, betrayed not only me, but our daughter too. And that kind of betrayal couldn't be washed away with signatures on a paper. No, I wanted him to feel what I felt. To be exposed. To be powerless. So I reached out to an old friend, Lydia, a lawyer who had once confided in me about her own husband's betrayal. She listened as I poured out every detail, her face grim but resolute. "We'll build a case," she said. "Not just for divorce, for custody, for damages, for everything he tried to steal from you." Her words lit a fire in me. For the first time in days, I felt something other than grief. I felt power simmering under my skin, begging to be unleashed. That night, when he finally came home, he tried to kiss my cheek like always. I flinched, pulling away. His brows knitted in confusion, but I said nothing. I let him eat the dinner I'd cooked, let him talk about his so-called conference, and I smiled through every lie. Inside, though, I was screaming. Every word he spoke was another crack in the mask I wore. When he finally fell asleep, I stood over him for a long time, watching the man I once thought was my soulmate. I searched his face, trying to find the husband I had loved, but all I saw was a stranger, a liar, a coward. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. He would regret underestimating me. I wasn't just going to leave him. I was going to vanish from his life in a way that would haunt him. But before I did, I would make sure his secrets destroyed him. I told myself I would make this clean, that I would let the law do the ugly work so I wouldn't become the thing I hated. But even with Lydia and the papers ready, there was a part of me that wanted to watch the moment it broke him, the precise second when his careful life of half-truths and rehearsed charm collapsed into something raw and exposed. I wanted him to feel that small, stinging humiliation that stays with you longer than any scream. Still, I kept my hands steady. There is an art to revenge that doesn't look like a tantrum. It looks like patience, preparation, and timing. So we prepared. We spent the next week assembling every scrap of evidence I had gathered, and then some. Lydia unearthed bank transfers I didn't know existed, small amounts funneling out of our joint account into a hidden card in Megan's name. A former IT teacher, someone I owed a favor to from my early days mentoring at the school, pulled deleted emails from my husband's laptop. There was the hotel confirmation, yes, but also meticulous logs of reimbursements for conference expenses that matched dinners with Megan, receipts for gifts to her that were listed as classroom supplies. It painted a pattern: deception, theft, and arrogance that assumed the truth could be laundered away with a line item. I called the detective we'd quietly been whispering to, Detective Morales, a woman who never smiled but who kept her word. She read the file once and then again, her face darkening with each turn of paper. "This isn't just adultery," she said finally. "You've got enough here for embezzlement charges, maybe fraud. If we play this right, we can get a warrant." That's the language of real power, the kind that hums in your veins when you realize the world can be made honest by facts and signatures and other people's courage. We set the date for the sting on a morning that felt ordinary: coffee steam on the windowsill, Emma laughing at cartoons downstairs, the house blissfully unaware of the trap being planned under its roof. I made the choice to serve the papers myself. Not because it was the legal thing, Lydia could have done it, but because I needed him to see the human consequence of his choices up close. I wanted him to feel the silence of a life that had burned its bridges. We met at a small bistro, a place he'd recommended for a quiet conversation. He arrived with exhausted charm, Megan beside him with that thin smile I'd hated since the first day I saw it. He kissed her hand in public like a husband, like a lover, like a man who had something to prove to himself. I sat down opposite them, took a breath, and slid the envelope he would not want to open across the table. Divorce papers, clean and stark, the legal end to 10 years. He blinked, the practiced composure slipping like paint underwater. Then, with a calm that came from months of sharpening patience, I reached into my bag and laid out the rest copies of the records, the bank statements, the emails. I watched his face as the words rearranged themselves into meaning. Megan's smile faltered. For a beat, I felt a child's glee. This was it. This was the justice of ordinary truths, revealing the extraordinary betrayal. It was timed, of course. Lydia had given a signal. Detective Morales waited at a distance with a team. When the waitress came to clear plates, 2 uniforms quietly filled the doorway. You would think a man used to power would go white with anger, and for a second he did, but then his rage tipped into pleading and pleading into something small. "This can be fixed," he said, voice cracking. "We can." His sentences dissolved under the weight of the evidence. Megan's eyes darted toward the exit, and for the first time I saw fear there, not the thin excitement of an affair, but the real animal fear of someone realizing her options had been counted. They didn't scream. They didn't call me names. That was a detail I hadn't expected, the politeness in the final moments before a man is unmasked. Detective Morales read them their rights with a procedural calm that felt almost kind. The handcuffs were a coppery kiss of consequence I had dreamed about when grief and rage made a nest in me. I watched them led away. Passers-by glanced up from their phones, curious at the small drama unfolding in daylight. I felt the world tilt, not because I had hatched a melodrama, but because truth had weight and gravity, and now it pulled at the foundations of the life that had tried to collapse me. After the arrests, the bistro felt too small, too public for the private storm inside my chest. I stepped outside, called Lydia, and then looked up at the sky the way you do after a door slams, and you're standing on the threshold of something new. Emma was waiting for me in the car, hair in pigtails, oblivious to the legal choreography I had arranged. She ran into my arms, and for a moment I let myself be simply her mother, wrap her up, breathe her, and promise safety with my whole body. But I had not only planned the papers and the arrests, I had planned the vanishing. This was the last act I owed myself, to leave without the chance for them to twist my departure into the narrative they preferred. Lydia had already filed for emergency custody and secured protective orders. Detective Morales had assured me the warrants and the evidence would hold. The school board had been informed. An audit was underway. There was no reason to linger and watch the slow unraveling in the news cycles. Some people need the spectacle. We didn't. So that night after Emma slept, I packed a single bag for each of us: clothes, photos, the little things that made our house a home. I left a note on the kitchen table, not a letter to him, not a plea, just the facts. Divorce served, custody, filed evidence, turned over, no contact. No declarations of hatred, no dramatic ultimatums, just a woman reclaiming her life and the child at its center. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and for the first time in a long while I did not look back. We drove until the city lights became a smear behind us and the road opened into something that felt like possibility. I booked a small rental under Lydia's name, a temporary island, while the storm did its work. Emma fell asleep against my shoulder with the exhausted trust of children, and I watched her breathe, feeling the tension in my ribs ease just a fraction. I texted Lydia a single line: "They're in custody, we're safe for now." She replied with a heart and a single word: "Brave." I vanished because some endings are cleaner that way. Because revenge, when it's mixed with love, sometimes looks less like a spectacle and more like protection. I wanted him to wake up to the reality of his life without me in it, to realize the consequences of choosing someone else over the family he vowed to protect. I wanted Megan to understand that her thrill was built on a ruin she could not patch. And mostly, I vanished to give Emma a chance to rebuild in peace. There is a deep dignity in leaving an abusive script, in refusing to be a character in someone else's story. I left not because I wanted to punish them with absence, but because the absence itself is a kind of boundary, a line drawn in the sand that says you cannot cross here. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural. The world continued to spin, the news cycle moved on, and yet I held a fragile bubble of safety for Emma that I had fought tooth and nail to create. We settled into the small rental, unpacked a few essential things, and let the days pass without incident. For the first time in months, I could watch her eat breakfast without wondering if she'd been betrayed, watch her laugh at cartoons without calculating what lies had been whispered to her behind closed doors. I spent my nights reflecting, remembering the path that led me here. It hadn't been a single moment of courage that saved us, but 1,000 small, deliberate choices. Checking the hotel list, following the receipts, recording the inconsistencies, calling in favors from people who owed me years of trust. Every step was a test, and each one taught me something I had long forgotten, that love for a child can sharpen a mind, like a blade can turn fear into clarity and grief into strategic patience. The legal system worked as it should in some small measure. Christy and my husband faced the full weight of the evidence I had compiled, and while no amount of punishment could truly undo the betrayal, justice was at least documented, undeniable, and public. I knew the arrests would ripple through their world, making every lie harder to tell, every manipulation more exposed. Watching it unfold from a distance, I felt neither joy nor vengeance. It was simply the balance being restored. Emma, blissfully unaware of the full horror we had narrowly escaped, began to heal in ways that astonished me. She started school again, tentatively, at first, then with more confidence as she remembered how much she was loved. She spoke openly about her fears, her anger, and we talked through every feeling together. I held her hand through every nightmare, every flash of doubt that our family could survive, and I realized something important: healing isn't a race. It's the slow accumulation of moments when you choose trust over suspicion, love over bitterness. And yet the memories stayed. Sometimes late at night I'd wake up and hear echoes of their voices, the words they had whispered, the lies they had told, the way they had tried to tear our family apart. I would sit on the couch, watch Emma sleep, and breathe deeply, letting the anger burn itself out into quiet reflection rather than consuming me. This was part of survival too, acknowledging what had happened without letting it dictate every future step. I learned that revenge, when mixed with justice and strategy, can be a tool of protection rather than destruction. I didn't want to break them for pleasure. I wanted to break the cycle of harm, to make sure my daughter knew she could be safe, that love and courage can outmatch betrayal. And in this, I found a strange peace. Not a happiness born of forgetting, but a quiet dignity that comes from reclaiming control over your own life and protecting the people who matter most from those who would harm them. Looking back, I see the entire chain of events as both a nightmare and a revelation. A nightmare because I never imagined that the people I trusted most could harbor such malice. A revelation because it taught me the depths of my own resilience. I had been tested, broken, and pushed to the edge, and I had survived not by luck, not by chance, but by relentless love, clear-headed action, and the refusal to be passive in the face of injustice. If you've ever felt betrayed, if someone you loved has hurt you or your child, know this: the path forward may be frightening, uncertain, and lonely, but courage is built in these small, deliberate steps. Every action you take to protect the ones you love is a brick in a fortress no betrayal can topple. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in watching someone fall, it's in reclaiming your own life, preserving your family, and teaching the next generation that loyalty and truth are stronger than lies. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, justice, and the power of truth. And leave a comment if you faced betrayal and found your strength because your story matters and someone out there needs to hear it.